again, it's a year to the war, and we can look back and we can see the extent of Russian really defeat. Yes, they took a lot of land in the first week or so of the conflict. Since then, Russia's basically been in retreat. They retreated from Kiev, and they retreated from the northeast. They were then completely pushed back from areas of Luhansk province, and recently they were pushed back out of Kherson, out of the city, and much of that province. Russia still occupies big swaths of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians certainly are struggling to put together the forces, both in terms of the numbers of troops and in terms of the tanks and weapon systems that they would need to reoccupy, to retake all of the land taken from them by force by Putin. But they are building towards that. There are Ukrainian troops being trained in Poland, being trained in the UK. Indeed, the British King visited the Ukrainian troops being trained in the UK. Weapon systems are flowing into Ukraine, whether those are weapon systems, long-range artillery, more ammunition, tanks. The tanks are not the greatest tanks in the world. A lot of Leopard 1s, unfortunately, some Leopard 2s. Those are super duper really good tanks, but Leopard 1s will do the job, certainly against Russian tanks. Leopard 1s are the older generation of tanks that the Europeans are supplying, but Leopard 2 are the new generation tanks that are also being supplied. They're going to get some Abrams tanks down the road. Who knows when that'll happen exactly, but they will get them at some point. And they are building up a military, and they will build up their military capabilities so they can take on Russian forces and kick them out of the rest of Ukraine. And I think that's very doable, and I think that Putin knows that, and I think the Russia knows that. At the same time, I've said this many times on the show over the last year, but Russia's lost no matter how what happens from now on. They're not going to take Ukraine. They're not going to conquer Ukraine. They might still put up a fight. I mean, latest reports suggest that the Russians are amassing troops on the Belarus-Ukrainian border to the north of Kiev. They might take another shot at trying to take Kiev. I do not think they have the capabilities of doing that. The forces that will try this out of Belarus are even less well-equipped and less well-trained than the troops that tried to do this last year. But you could see another front opening in the north of Ukraine, which would be really tragic, but could nevertheless extend the war and make it more difficult for Ukraine. But it could very well happen. It could be kind of what Putin is hoping for as a resolution for all of this. So all of that is true. But look, Putin's lost. Sweden and Finland, in spite of Turkey and in spite of everything, I think Sweden and Finland will become members of NATO. That opens up a new NATO border with Russia that is longer than the Ukrainian border. It is a massive defeat for Putin to have Sweden and Finland as members of NATO. Sweden and Finland are both not only have a long border with Russia, but they are both countries that produce actual weapon systems. They're both countries that are industrialized. They're both Western advanced countries. They've got very, very well-trained militaries. They would be very motivated fighting on their own border. The Finns have a history with the Russians in terms of fighting and holding them back. Yes, so I think just that is a massive blow to Russia, not something the Russians expected, not something at all the Russians expected. I think the fact that Western Europe, or Europe generally, has stuck together in opposition to Russia, and we'll see if that holds. There always seems to be, the Germans always seems to be tempted away. But it seems to be holding so far. The French seem to be getting more committed rather than less committed. You've got Germany. You've got, Western Europe seems to be so far united in support of Ukraine, and that is a massive achievement that nobody expected. And all these weapon systems flowing into Ukraine is a tribute to that. And then, so that is massive. And then finally, Russia is defeated by the very fact that it has been shown to be a paper tiger, super vulnerable, super weak. super pathetic, whiny. I mean, I don't know if we'll talk about Putin's speech in a minute. So, Russia is now I think there's no question that Russia is today a third-rate power. It is not a multipolar world where Russia stands opposite the United States as another pole that can move the world in one way or the other. There's only one viable alternative to the United States in terms of the geopolitics, the world politics, and that's China. Russia has taken itself out of the running completely. The only chance that Russia has to continue this war in Ukraine and not to give up territory and to keep fighting is for China to start providing it with ammunition and with military technology. If China did this, Russia would then be basically a satellite state of the Chinese. This would be a Chinese world, an American and Chinese world, and Russia would be a non-entity. And it would be very clear to the Russians. Russia alone cannot sustain a battle against the West. Russia has to have China. I'm not sure that China has to have Russia. The advantage that China has in having Russia is that Russia can keep Europe and the US occupied in Europe, and China can work to try to dominate Asia. And that's why China would like to have Russia. But Russia becomes then a satellite state. Putin becomes a satellite of Xi. Xi becomes the dominant player in the world outside of, the United States of America. So Russia loses no matter what. Even if it gets Chinese support, Russia as a power, Russia as a force, Russia as an entity that needs to be dealt with in the world is finished, basically. One way or the other, the era now is an era of the United States. From a kind of global politics perspective, this is now an era of China and the United States, and Russia has no part of it. Russia has no part to play. In many respects, Russia was already a non-entity, but I think this Putin's mistake in going to war basically is going to make Russia a completely irrelevant and completely non-entity and completely irrelevant to world politics in the years to come. Thank you for listening or watching the Yaron Brookes Show. If you'd like to support the show, we make it as easy as possible for you to trade with me. You get value from listening. You get value from watching. Show your appreciation. You can do that by going to yaronbrookshow.com/support, by going to Patreon, Subscribestar, Locals, and just making a appropriate contribution on any one of those channels. Also, if you'd like to see the Yaron Brookes Show grow, please consider sharing our content and, of course, subscribe. Press that little bell button right down there on YouTube so that you get an announcement when we go live. And for those of you who are already subscribers and those of you who are already supporters of the show, thank you. I very much appreciate it.